and probably just notified you that everyone's that I'm recording. Okay, so everyone on here knows who we are, and so we're not going to explain that. Mom and I wanted to do this tough it out and impossible expectation just because that's what you're told your whole life as an athlete, and it's just not reality when it comes to mental health. So we've been trying to do just a little bit of education and stories and trying to have a conversation about mental health. And thanks for joining the people who are here, and hopefully people watch the recording. But other than that, we're going to do a little bit of education, and we're going to do a little bit of all sorts of things. Mom's going to teach us a lot, and I'll talk a little bit about just my experience with it and everything like that. So, okay. So first, I just wanted to talk about my personal experience. I mean, everyone here knows what I was doing my whole life, but I played softball for so many years that the second that it's over, you have no idea what else to do. And it's almost like that's your identity, and you're taught at the very end that your identity is going to change, and then there's not really any help with the transition. And so really, I didn't know really what to do. Luckily, my mom's a therapist and could help me a little bit through it, but I definitely had to talk to a therapist of my own because it was hard. You all of a sudden are all far away from all your teammates, and you're not in competition, and you're not really doing anything that you were doing before. And so for me, it was really hard, and I went straight into playing overseas because of it. I knew that I wasn't ready to be done. I knew I didn't want to play in the United States, but I knew that softball wasn't really over for me. So I went overseas and then came back to the working world and just couldn't handle it for very long. I think I lasted about a year before I decided that I'm going to go play again. So maybe 6 months in, I knew that of just working in normal United States economy, was pretty much time for me to do something else. And I knew it really fast. And so I started working out again. I started working out hard, and I started pitching, and I went overseas to Italy again because I knew that it was time to do something else. And so even though I was coaching and kind of being involved a little bit with softball, it just wasn't really enough for me because I missed the team and I missed the competition. And also, like, if we're being totally honest, I miss, the praise and the rewards that come with winning, and so once I decided to go overseas, I knew that this was probably my last season, just because working in healthcare, it's really hard to take a big break. And so once I went over there, though, I knew that it was time to move on. Almost the entire season, it was just filled with things that didn't go the way I wanted them to, that felt like I was too old for, and that my body was too old for, and that I was just ready to be done with. So I think for me, it was a little easier at that point to transition out. I mean, obviously, the first time I went to Czech Republic, I didn't really transition out of sports because I went right back into it. I never fully healed and had that closure that comes with ending your sport. And so I went back overseas, and I learned a lot and grew a lot and got to be with a lot of my favorite people. And by the time I came home, I knew that it was over, and I figured out that in that trip with Italy, it wasn't softball that was so fun. It was traveling, and it was being with my friends. And so like the whole part of Italy that I loved was being with my friends and traveling. And once I had to play softball again, I realized, oh yeah, it's time for me to be done. But I know not everyone is like that. And so some people decide to coach, some people play until they can't anymore, and some people just struggle. So that was kind of my experience. I know that now that I am done, one of the biggest things that I missed was having a gym partner. And I love that about being in Italy, is that I got to actually have someone to work out with and to talk to in the mornings when I'm at the gym, and I don't have a lot of motivation on my own sometimes. And so I really missed that. And so I did find a gym partner and tried to start doing that until I started loving the gym again. Now I work out pretty much solo, but it was nice to have that little transition into the weight room again by having a friend to talk to the whole time, like I did my whole life. One of the other things I always miss is the competition. And, you can make little games in your life and goals at work, and other ways to be competitive and feel like you're meeting your goals. We also play in a co-ed volleyball league and things like that you can do just to kind of feel like you're still, athletic and winning and things like that. But for the most part, you just have to find a new circle. It's really hard to be away from those people you were with all the time. And especially for me, moving home and being so far away from every single one of them. I don't even have one of my friends from college that's still here. So I just kind of decided which of my old friendships were worth stoking and being back with them all the time, and which of my friendships from before weren't really worth it anymore, and which ones weren't serving me and who I want to be and who I am now. And so I created a new circle, and that really helped me, is finding some new friends. And then other than that, I coach still, and I give lessons, especially when I'm missing softball. I might decide to start a camp or something like that, but I'm always getting messages from parents and questions, and that kind of makes me feel like I'm still, challenging that side of my brain. And I still kind of feel like there's a field for me that a knowledgeable field that some people can't give, and so that was kind of my personal experience. And I know Mom is going to give a little bit more of the general experience and just some education on how to handle it. But I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Morgan, I just wanted to add, excuse me, I wanted to add that you got a message yesterday from one of your pitchers who just signed, and what an inspiration or a good reward feeling that was for you, because you shared it with us. Do you want to, not the details of it, but just talk about how that feels as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. And now that I am in a coaching position, I do have that role where even if it's just extra money on the side for me or keeping me in the game, these girls, I'm their coach. And I know we have so many coaches that we look up to and that have inspired us and have been role models for us. And now that I'm in that position, it is really cool to get that rewarding message. Like Mom said, one of the pitchers that I worked with a lot, she signed yesterday to a D1 school, and that's pretty cool coming from Montana. So I was really proud of her. And it just makes you feel proud, like she actually learned from you. And she said, I would never have made it here without you. And really, I didn't feel like I worked with her enough to make that big of a difference, but I must have if she messaged me, and I've had little things like that come up throughout the time I've been coaching. I did coach even in college. So I've had a lot of years of lessons that I've been giving. And sometimes, a girl's mom sends me a poem she wrote at school and it's about me or something like that. And it is a really nice, rewarding feeling that I wouldn't get otherwise. So just being involved in sports and having that knowledge base that you get to give and share with others is a big rewarding part of the transition.
Okay, so could you share my quote? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the clinical side, or the kind of research side of all of this, and where therapy comes into the retirement. But I thought, as I was doing some research, I thought this was an amazing quote. So the boxing legend, Sugar Ray Leonard, famously quoted, "Nothing could satisfy me outside the ring. There is nothing in life that can compare to becoming a world champion. Having your hand raised in the moment of glory with thousands, millions of people cheering you on." And Morgan talked a little bit about that, the desire to still have that level of praise and the competition and the win and all those kinds of things. And I thought, wow, even Sugar Ray Leonard had that experience, and he actually retired 5 different times, which is kind of funny because, we talk about retirement as if it happened. And I think technically Morgan probably retired once along the way and then went back. So it happens. So that's just to kind of do an icebreaker to let you know that it definitely is across all sports and across all, it could be finishing as a high school student or high school athlete, it could be finishing at the college level or professional level. So there is this big point about retiring from athletics, at least your competitive athletics, but then you can go on to do other things. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Another thing I wanted to share is that retired athletes have a high risk for developing depression as they have to learn how to cope with real life, like a regular life where they're no longer in the limelight. Some retired athletes may even become depressed because they feel like they have become forgotten members of society. And so where this is really talking about the identification, right? Like, who am I now that I'm not a Buckeye, or now that I'm not whatever it is that you were in your sport. And so we as therapists really have to pay attention to the other side of sports too. So we've talked for a couple of months about how to do early intervention, how to be watching for signs of somebody who may be struggling with depression or anxiety or something else. And now this is more about the other side of that. It's like, I think most of you were on before when we talked about every college athlete should meet with the sports psychologist at the beginning of each season and at the end of each season, just to do a check-in. And this is the same kind of thing. It's like the end where it's like, let's talk about what it's going to be like in your life when you're not in an organized setting where all your tennis shoes are purchased for you and somebody feeds you all the time. And, you know, that's just part of your persona. And now it's, who am I? So thinking about it on the back end too, it's, if you think about it in terms of a career, like in the workforce, it's the same kind of thing. Many people plan to retire and then they retire and say, wait a minute, who am I? What am I doing? I don't know how to do this. And then they go to work at Lowe's because they just want a reason to get up in the morning. And so this is very similar, and we need to look at it as a serious transition for athletes. So I am going to read this little part. I try not to do a lot of reading, but I'm going to read this because I think those of you who are athletes or are parents of athletes, you're going to really hold on to this. So athletes by nature are mentally tough individuals and are often perceived by the public to be fitter, healthier, and happier than others. It is this attitude and stereotyping that can make it more difficult for them to approach someone for help. And, you know, we've talked about this for months too. It's like everybody thinks you have the perfect life as an athlete, and you really don't. You might have some extras that they don't have, but you also have extra responsibilities. So it is really hard to show that you need some help. Therefore, it is highly important for close family, friends, teammates, and coaches to understand that depression cannot always be seen, and that the athlete may indeed never admit to how they feel for fear of shame and embarrassment. Again, just that the difficulty asking for help when you should have it all together. So I'll talk a little bit about how friends and family and teammates can help each other out throughout this process. The most important take-home message is to understand that despite their incredible success in their hard-fought and dedicated careers, the process of retirement is a difficult one, and it is in this time that social support and communication is of vital importance if the athlete is to avoid the dreaded post-retirement blues. So again, that just means falling into a depression, not knowing where you belong and who you are and all of that. So why does this happen? It happens for three major reasons, and there are obviously many more, but these are the three categories. One is loss of identity. Again, if you started playing basketball when you were 6 and you play it until, you know, you're 25 or whatever, then it's, well, who am I if I don't have a basketball in my hand? Or who am I if I don't have my jersey? And so just figuring out, who are you beyond your sport? Or yes, you could be a legend, or you can be whatever, but it's like, then what? You are so much more than an athlete, right? Because you're typically a sibling and a child, and you have a partner, and you work somewhere, and you're a friend, and all the pieces and parts of your life that you may have not been identified as, but they're definitely part of you. I know both of my kids, you know, had to limit their activities when they were in their sport of choice. And so, you know, you might have been a skier, then you couldn't ski, and now you can ski again. And so it's important to remember what you used to love. And if you're still capable of doing that, to make that connection and reach out. The other thing is tunnel vision. So this is the second one, and this is really the fact that you were hyper-focused on your sport. Some people are multi-sport athletes in college, but for the most part, in college and in the professional world, you have one sport. So all you know is that sport. And so if it's running track, it's everything is about competition, everything is about prepping, everything's about your pregame, all of those pieces and parts, going to class because your coach told you to versus going to class because you want to learn something in college. All of that has been your tunnel vision all this time. And now you have this whole world in front of you to say, wait a minute, what do I want to do for the next 75 years of my life? So we may have to do this and have this kind of tunnel vision, but we don't have to continue that as we move on in our lives. And so even with both of my kids, you know, we talk about our experience a lot in here just to make it kind of make sense to everyone. Is like, it used to be the first thing anybody would ask me is, how is rugby? How is softball? Not how is Morgan? How is John? Right? It was more like their sport was how, where we made our connections with people and that kind of thing. So we always talked about sports, and we're now talking about the next stages of their lives. And so, and really embracing that, that's beyond the sport, even though they're still involved in sports. And then the other thing that I think is really important, this is more of a clinical perspective and something people might not have thought about, but is this decreased level of serotonin. So when you're in a competition and you get fired up and motivated and ready to roll, and you get that rush of serotonin that makes you happy and energetic and competitive and at the top of your game, you have been pumping that extra serotonin into your brain since you were maybe 12 years old in AAU or whatever, and all, you know, for at least 13 to 15 years. And so your brain actually doesn't know how to deal with a lower level of serotonin. So it's a true transition to, it's almost like weaning off of a drug, or when somebody has been in law enforcement, for instance, and then they go into retirement. It sends people into a depression very, very often because they're so used to being amped up at this level, and regular life feels kind of lame. And so your body has to adapt and figure out what your baseline is now. It won't be at that level for the most part. And so how do you live at this lower serotonin level, which the rest of the world
I don't know if she cut out, but it makes me think of diet culture and just dieting in general as an athlete. You think about how much we eat as athletes just to survive, and you eat to be full all the time, and you're working out 4 hours a day. So why not, you know? And then all of a sudden, when you're not an athlete anymore, you don't need to eat 2,200 calories anymore, and you can't eat a full pizza. I was saying that it makes me think of being like transitioning away from eating the way you do as an athlete. That's so hard. And your body is so used to eating this massive amount of food that by the time you're done, you feel like you need to keep eating that much, and you just don't, because you're not working out for 4 hours a day. It's very similar to that in terms of the serotonin levels, and it's almost in reverse. Like your serotonin's so high and so awesome while you're an athlete, and all of a sudden it's gone, and you have to find other ways to pump serotonin into your body. So anyway, go ahead, Mom.
Okay. I think I went away for a minute, but here I am. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do to help prevent a lot of this kind of post-retirement blues, as they called it. And if anybody has ideas, there are some retired athletes in the crowd. So when I'm done, it'd be awesome to hear kind of how you're living in retirement. So what can, okay. Here we go. So what can you do to reduce the chances of depression after retirement from sports? So the first is expand self-identity and pursue new interests. So I talked a little bit about this, where you are so much more than an athlete, because you have family relationships, you have probably a career, you have a partner, you have pets, you have old sports you used to do that you couldn't do while you were in your sport of choice. So there's all of that. And then there's pursuing new interests. So most likely somebody is thinking, wow, I never did this. And now I'd really like to take up golf, Morgan. Just kidding. But you think about we have some football players who are now on a bobsled team, right? It's like, who would have thought football translates to bobsledding? But something like that, just thinking about what else can you do that you really couldn't do before because your sport limited you. So that is like an unlimited option and opportunity there. And sometimes we get stuck, and that's where we're going to need our people to remind us, remember how you used to love to do this or that. So that's one.
I know
The
for
next
me,
one.
like, sorry, mom, I'm interrupt. For me, mom talked about not skiing. I wasn't able to ski anymore. Oh, here comes Captain really fast. I wasn't able to ski anymore. And I didn't ski for 9 years. And I was almost a competitive skier. Like I was skiing every single weekend for like 10 years of my life. And then all of a sudden I just couldn't do it anymore. And I stopped my freshman year of high school. And then now I get to ski again. And I have been doing it a little bit more every year since I've been done with softball. And it is so fun. And it's something that does bring me that same feeling. And then on another note, I never was really a big reader in college or even in my master's because I had other things to read. If ever I was having time to read, I should be reading a textbook or I should be reading or doing my homework. There was always some other thing that I could be spending that reading time doing. And so now I love to read and I actually get to read. And recently, my friends and I started a book club, and it's just like our little group of friends, and Kat's on the call right now, but we pick a book and then we read it. We give ourselves a timeline that's realistic for all of us to read it with our busy lives. And then we have a FaceTime call and we get to talk about our book and what we thought. And it's kind of fun. It's like that little connection, but it's also those new interests that we get to share as a group that didn't have the thing that we used to share. So go ahead, Mama.
Okay. So the next one is considering coaching or mentoring other athletes. And we've talked a little bit about this where, there are so many coaching opportunities from a formal situation to doing private lessons or just being a buddy to an athlete and helping them through the process of, what do you want to do? How much do you want this? If they're starting to lose interest or be unsure of themselves, to kind of be that person to help them along the way. Another one in the kind of mentoring of athletes is really where some public speaking can come in. And that can be really, really helpful too, just inspiring coaches, inspiring other athletes, inspiring young people, that kind of thing, where you can really share your story and kind of capitalize on what you experience, but also feel good about sharing that with somebody who may have never met a college or professional athlete like that. The next one is acquiring new coping skills for time management and stress management. The reason this is important is, especially at the college level, is your life is managed. You're told when you go to practice, you're told when you go to lift, you're told here's what you're having for snacks. You don't even, you might pick what your meal is on a trip, but you have very low responsibility for all of those kinds of things. Maybe high stress for sure, but a lot of that is managed in your little bubble when you are a college or professional athlete. And so figuring out how do you do that without Letta, telling you what time you're going to eat, or that your new socks have arrived, or whatever it is, that now you're responsible for that. And figuring out how do I fit in a workout and get to work and, take care of my family and all of that, figuring out how to do that without somebody doing it for you. And many people do that right out of high school, but athletes really, that's delayed for them. And so just trying to figure out how does normal life work and how to get that and train yourself to do it. And sometimes you need to talk to someone else who can help you make, those kinds of things possible, especially if you were working out 6 or 7 days a week and now you're trying to manage a life where you only work out 3 days a week. How do you even wrap your head around that? How do you get your work done after school or after work if you have something you have to fit in? Like, how do you balance all of that? It's a whole new experience, and really important to learn those coping skills so that that's successful for you too. So you don't feel like you're not capable of managing yourself. The next one is keep strong relationships with coaches, teammates, family, and friends who care about their success in sports, but also their personal growth. So what this means is many times a team will be together, you know, it's your best friends, it's your favorite manager, coach, or whatever. And then once the sport is over, that disappears. And Morgan just talked a little bit about this, how she and her friends have decided to do a book club that has absolutely nothing to do with softball, but it's a way to stay connected under a different umbrella. And so these are the same kind of people that you would talk about. Should I go overseas and play? Should I, you know, do this? I'm thinking about getting my master's. You know, these are all the people who can help you, who are not just a fan of you as an athlete. They're actually a fan of you in life, and they're going to see those transitions happen, and they're going to help you along the way.
I think also the biggest part about these people is they understand what you went through, and they understand how it went, you know, they understand how hard it was. They understand you. That was the hardest part of our lives, while it might have been also the funnest part of our lives, or some of the funnest part of our lives. But I know that one of my biggest issues making friends with people that weren't athletes, they just don't get it. You know, they weren't parents of the athletes. They weren't athletes themselves. They don't understand the time we had to put in, the effort we had to put in, and having those people that do, that you can connect with, is just a whole different understanding. It's a whole totally different type of friend. And not that the other friends aren't also helpful, but for me, I've found that that's so important to me. Otherwise, I just don't feel understood as a whole. So just wanted to add that.
And I don't know if John can respond, my son and her brother, but like for him, he's played all over the country in his sport, which is rugby. And he has people like this everywhere because he's moved so many different times. And so still building that family that cares about you beyond your sport, and family meaning family, friends, teammates, all the things. And then the last one is seek professional help. So if your family, yourself, you know, and your friends can't get this figured out and help you get on a path that keeps you from depression, that's when you need to seek professional help. And one of the best things about professional help, meaning, you know, a counselor or therapist or something, is these are people who are not invested emotionally in your world. So you can talk with them about, you know, your dad was too hard on you, or, you know, you had a situation with your coach, or you don't know what to do about, you know, this friend, or whatever it is. What's really nice about that level, the very opposite of family and friends, is that these are the people who can hear your story, dissect it without emotion, and then give you feedback and help you figure out, who am I without my sport? You know, how can I acquire new coping skills? You know, I don't know who I am to my dad if I'm not his little ball player, right? And all of those things can be handled in therapy as well. Not everybody needs therapy, certainly. A lot of people can do this on their own, but I just always like to remind you that that is an option. And there are people who do specialize in athlete mental health and usually they were athletes themselves and can really definitely empathize with you, but not feel emotionally responsible for you, if that makes sense. All right. Morgie, is John on here still? I think he had a client.
He was with the client, I think.
Okay. I was hoping he could talk with us a little bit about his experience in his transition from sports. He's still doing it some, but maybe some of the other people on the call, we could just ask for their, to share their experience about how they're transitioning.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone here, maybe Kat or Jess, would maybe want to share.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I guess so. Right after college, I had, or I guess I should say softball. I had an extra year where I just had to finish up my school. So I did have a year where I could kind of just be a student instead of being a student athlete. But I don't really think I fully, I guess, like transitioned from being an athlete in college just because, you know, you're still in the little college bubble and whatnot. But I mean, I definitely did go through a period where I was like, what is going on here? You know, how do I have all this extra time? What do I do with all this extra time when you're constantly go, 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 and then suddenly you don't have to be somewhere constantly or in class and then to tutoring and then to work out or whatever. Um, but I mean, how do I've found things that have helped where like I take my dog on a walk, which is something I didn't have a dog before, but you know, like I didn't, you know, have that, like, it's really calming for me to just like decompress from the day. I've always liked to cook, but I didn't necessarily have time. So like I have time to cook now and read, and because I'm in the book group too, and it's just so nice to just, you know, catch up once a month. And I know even if we don't talk every day, but I know if I call one of them, you know, they're going to pick up and they're going to be like, what's up? Do you need anything? And things like that. Um, for a while, I just wanted to like step away from softball. I was kind of burnt out. But I'm a teacher, and the middle school that I'm at here in Texas is really big on football and stuff. So I have a lot of athletes. And so I find the way that I give back the most is, you know, helping them like with their time management and things like, listen, like you can't go home and play video games. Like you have to go home and, you know, make sure that you eat a good dinner and make sure that you do your homework and all those things. And it's funny because they're 12 and so they think they know everything, and then they don't. But it's just kind of, for me, it was just kind of like trial and error with things. And I feel like I finally found a balance. And I mean, it took me a little bit. Yeah. Okay. I think I kind of went everywhere with that. So sorry if it was just kind of like word vomits.
It was perfect.
It was great. Thanks, Kat. Yeah. I mean, I think that is really interesting. I didn't think of it in that way where you got that extra year to kind of have that transition, but also it wasn't like a cut and dry from college, because you still could go to a softball game if you wanted, or you could at least be around that same like atmosphere. So that's really interesting. And I wonder like if that would have been like always a benefit for people, you know, or if some people feel almost worse by staying another year. I think I would have probably felt the way you did, but I think there are some people who would have, you know, maybe unhealthily stayed by the softball team and stay around and, you know, and kind of almost feel like they're living vicariously through them. So I think it's really cool that you felt like you could progress through that year. That's really awesome.
That also, Kat, made me think about the more recent athletes who just experienced 1 or 2 extra COVID years, right? It wasn't because they had 1 more year of school or whatever, but then it's like you lose a season and then you get to stay another year, but are you a junior or a senior or what are you? And that has had a big impact on people trying to figure out what are they? Are they a red shirt senior? Are they a COVID senior? I don't even know what it's called, but it seems like it would be a blessing and a curse, right? It could be a wonderful opportunity for some, but it might actually, some people might stay and wish they hadn't. Who else do we have? Jess, are you going to talk to us?
You don't have to share, Jess, but if you would, we'd love it.
We'd like to see
Hi,
you too.
sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I was having some sound difficulties. Okay, you can hear me now though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm probably the most recent grad on here because I I just finished up a couple months ago. And everything you guys have been saying is totally true. Like free time is a foreign concept that I am slowly getting used to. Even with working full time, I still have more time like as an adult working full time than as a student athlete with class and practice and everything, which is a crazy concept. But I've been like screenshotting all the slides you're putting up because they're just so true and it's like important to remember. And it can be hard to like get into new hobbies and things outside of your sport. I was kind of forced to take it even one step further. I had a couple of surgeries this summer from like a softball injury, and then I got my appendix out. So I couldn't even work out for a few months. So it was even more of an extreme where not only couldn't I play softball, I also couldn't work out. I like couldn't do anything. So kind of going along with that, like really forcing myself to get out of my comfort zone and like find new hobbies that were very, very different from anything in the athletic space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's happened with a lot of my friends. I know that some of my year above me, they didn't work out for a long time intentionally. They didn't have any like medical excuse to not work out. They just truly were so burnt out from the lifestyle that they just wanted to stop for a long time. And I didn't ever really experience that because I went and played right away. And then I went right back to the gym. But then when I went to Italy last year, I didn't work out for like 3 months, I think. And that's the longest I have gone without the gym since I was probably 14. And so it was really weird and I was bored, but it was really easy to get into that like, oh, I don't need to go to the gym. I don't want to go to the gym. And it was hard to kick it again to get back into the gym. And it's just so funny how the cycle works because I was so burnt out and didn't want to. And then by the time I needed to, it was almost too late. Like I had to work pretty hard. So that's really interesting. And I know that like for you, Jess, you have a lot of time still to have that transition period. Like, it took me almost 3 years. And so I know that is not necessarily everyone, but I think everyone will probably have their own experience for it. But I think being ahead of it right now, like you are, like just kind of focusing on it, be conscious of it, and then maybe your transition will be shorter.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to add is, I mean, as you guys probably know, at Ohio State, they let you talk to your sports psych for 2 years after you graduate, which is a really cool part of that program that Ohio State has. And just kind of, I bring that up because it was really talking to Morgan and Kat, hearing about how they were talking to the sports psych people that encouraged me to start talking to them like that next year. I don't know if I would have made that step without hearing those seniors on our team like talk about how important that was. And I'm like still talking to them now after I graduated.
That makes me feel really good. And also it's kind of ironic that we're the three on the phone call. But I do think that's a really cool program. And I think it's rare. I don't know how many schools do that. But it's almost like a resource that needs to be just projected in like the Batman signal, like everyone needs to know about this because it's expensive. That's one thing that people don't really talk about. Like going to a therapist, it can be expensive if you don't have specific insurance. And so I'm lucky, like I said, all the time because I have my mom, but my therapist that I love, like it's expensive every time. It's like $50 to go talk to her. And some people do that every week. I'm like, if I did that every week, that'd be $200 a month, the car payment, or that's Captain's dog food for 2 months, like it's so hard to prioritize your mental health sometimes. And so being able to utilize something like that is so essential. And just, I would encourage you to share it with your friends because that is super cool.
Also, Morgan, it's $50 copay. It's even more.
Oh
than
yeah,
that
sorry,
if you
$50
had to
for
pay out of
myself
pocket.
with good insurance. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about that. People go without mental health care exactly for financial reasons. It seems like a no-brainer, but it's not that easy. Morgan, you did list on our agenda some ideas to join competitions. Do you want to mention a little bit about some of those ideas you had, or do you want me to read them?
You can go ahead.
So we were talking about all those things you can do to help prevent depression. And Morgan had listed finding new hobbies or healthy ways to channel whatever it is you loved about being an athlete. So not necessarily in your sport, but the types of things that got you fired up. So competition like CrossFit, join some sort of activity like slow pitch softball, golf league, volleyball league, basketball league, tennis club, running club. Just find a gym partner. Like, try to think outside of the box of the types of things that you could do. And when you get old, you can do pickleball.
And I think it's important that you're finding like a healthy way to handle that competition. I think some people might, sit on the couch and watch TV and eat potato chips every night. And like, there are days that that's great. But I think as a whole, finding something that fires you up, but is a positive, healthy thing to add to your life. Whether it is walking your dog every day, I know that I love doing that, or hiking up in the mountains with my dog. But like Kat said, baking or cooking, I know cutting vegetables sometimes can just be the most like calming thing, and knowing that you're feeding your body something nutritious afterwards. There are different ways to make this happen. And I know not everyone misses the competition, or like not everyone is competitive and that's what they miss. Some people that is, and if so, you can do something like CrossFit where there's competitions every morning, or join a league where you need to win and there's a bracket and things like that. And so I think knowing what it is that you miss is essential. I miss the friends personally. I miss my friends, and I miss traveling the country, and maybe even overseas if that's the case. And so making sure I'm always having a trip scheduled or a trip planned. So there's something for me to look forward to, making sure I know when I'm seeing my friends again. I know this week finally get to come to Ohio, and I'm so excited because it's been a year. I haven't been there since November, and a lot of those friends I get to see again, and that's really exciting. So making sure that whatever you're missing can be filled in another way is just so important.
Mm-hmm. I think there's also something to be said about the college and professional programs that offer alumni outreach. Like, I played college volleyball a long time ago. It's probably almost been 30 years. And we still have an annual reunion. There's an alumni game that some people play in, but more than that, it's all the alumni get invited. And the kids used to go with me when they were young, and you go watch your team, and then they have this banquet afterwards, and the current players get to meet the old players, and it just kind of keeps a connection with hundreds and hundreds of, in my case, volleyball players who all shared the same sport. And I think that Ohio State's really good about that too, is keeping that connection. And I know not everybody plays a college sport, but anywhere that alumni connection can be fed, I think is really awesome. Okay, so does anybody have any questions for us or stories they want to share? Okay, Kat's the teacher, so is Nick. I could have let them do that part, but so I just want to do what we do every time that we talk, and just talk a little bit about how to reach out for help. You all know Morgan, and so I'm pretty sure you could reach out to her pretty easily, but we do have the opportunity to talk on Facebook Messenger. You can always reach out to her softball page and you'll get a hold of both of us. Talking to a school counselor or a sports psychologist, a parent, friend, or a coach. And we're going to actually update that suicide lifeline to the new 988 number. We talked a little bit about that last month, where now you can just dial 988 and you don't have to know that whole long phone number for the, it's called the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline now, and it's a national number, and it should just be shared with anybody and everybody. We want to make sure it's used also so that can maintain its status. The nice thing about the 988 number is that you can use it if you're struggling, but you can also use it if you have a friend who's struggling and you need advice on how to handle it. They will walk you through that as well. And there is somebody available 24 hours a day. So I think because this is Suicide Awareness Month, and we now finally have this national number that we can call, I think we're moving in the right direction as far as suicide awareness and suicide prevention. And then we're adding this piece of, you know, mental health with athletes and helping prevent depression and suicide in all the stages of being an athlete. So we are going to have guest speakers the next 2 months, right, Jorge, in October and November, I think, or maybe even the next 3 months. So we are just meeting once a month now, just because everybody's clearly knee deep in work and sports and family and all the things. And so we want to make sure that we bring the information, but also not overdo it. So we only have 1 or 2 people coming to listen. So we will be posting, I'll let you wrap it at the end, Morgan, but we will be posting when the next session is and what the topic is. So thank you for listening today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was awesome. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.